do is we really look at what was being spent in the last 12 months. So while you've been with the regional center, and this is of course assuming you have been with the regional center for at least 12 months, there are circumstances where individuals come into the self-determination program brand new to the regional center, which is totally fine. But for individuals that do have prior expenditures through our traditional service delivery system, we start looking at the last year's worth of spending that they did on their services to give us like a baseline, right? Like, how much have you spent so far? Was that enough for you? Was that working for you? What changes might we need to make? What services maybe do we need to change to meet those needs that weren't being met here?
So today we're going to be talking to Jennifer Huntley of the San Andreas Regional Center. And she's going to be talking about regional center services and specifically the self-determination program, which is a fairly new program that's available, and it allows the members of the regional center to really pick and choose the vendors that they want within a budget. So you'll get to hear exactly how this works. So listen up specifically for the terms independent facilitator and also financial management service, because those are the two vendors that you as parents might be working with in the future. So I hope you enjoy this interview and that you find it helpful. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to introduce you to Jennifer Huntley with San Andreas Regional Center. Thank you so much for being with us, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. So Jennifer, can you introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit about what you do at SARC, what's your role, and also what is a regional center?
Yeah, totally. So I'm Jennifer Huntley. Currently, my role at the regional center is a district manager, and that's specifically within the self-determination program department that we have here. I've actually worked at the regional center for about 5 years now. So I've been here all through all these SDP developments that have happened recently, which is really exciting. The regional center is really an incredible creation that came out of legislation back in like the 60s, but where a lot of individuals that we were working with that had developmental disabilities, so like autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, things like that. Oftentimes they were resorting to residing in like developmental centers or institutions where there was subpar care being provided. There's documentaries you can watch about this that talk about the care that individuals are receiving in these homes. And a lot of families really were advocating for a change. They were like, we don't want our kids living in these places. We don't want our family members living in these places. What can be done to revise the system that we have currently? So this resulted in the Lanterman Act being developed, which was signed into legislation in California. And that created this regional center system. So now we have 21 independent nonprofit organizations called regional centers all throughout the state. And they essentially, rather than receiving money from the government to pay for the development and running of these institutions, the money comes to the regional centers who then disperse it for the individuals for services that can be utilized out in the communities or in their homes rather than in these institutions, right? So that's kind of like the main function of the regional center and how it came to be.
Great. And I understand that California is really the only one that, the only state that has this type of setup of actually providing services through regional centers. Is that right?
Yeah, the regional centers are totally unique to California. Like the Lanterman Act only covers California. We do see some other states have similar type organizations, but not structured in the way that we are over here.
Excellent. And I'm a big fan. I think you guys do such great work. Okay, so you mentioned that you're part of the self-determination program, SDP. So what is that and how did it develop?
Yeah, so the way that the regional center system works essentially is individuals who have a qualifying diagnosis, who want to see if they're eligible for services, they complete an intake with our intake department. And then once they're deemed eligible, meaning they have a qualifying diagnosis and they exhibit the necessary level of like deficits, what we call them, it's basically saying that there is a significant need there for support. At that point, they get assigned to a service coordinator and we can make out referrals to vendored agencies. So these are companies that have contracts with the regional center. So they become vendors of ours. They submit a bunch of paperwork. They make sure that they're all ducks in the row for all of the important things that we need to look for to make sure that they are qualified to support the individuals that we serve, right? And that's like how it's worked for this entire time. And it still operates that way in a big capacity. So individuals that immediately come to the regional center, they are eligible for what we call traditional services, which is exactly what I just described, which is we send out a referral to an agency we're affiliated with. Of course, some of the shortcomings that come along with that is we have limited providers that are affiliated with us, right? And so what we found over decades of having this traditional service delivery system is that oftentimes the providers that we have don't meet the need of the individuals that we serve. And so again, family advocacy, parents, families coming together saying like, hey, we appreciate what the regional center is doing with the services that you have been able to provide thus far, but we need more. We need more flexibility. We need more access to services that are in the community. It feels very isolating having to rely on only providers that you guys are contracted with. And so this information was taken, and the Department of Developmental Services, which is our overseeing agency here in California, they were like, well, let's create a different program that can meet these needs, right? And so that's how the self-determination program came to be. They were like, all right, you don't have to work with our providers anymore. You don't have to work strictly with them. What we can do instead is we can give you a budget that is the same amount of money that we would be paying those traditional providers. But rather than that money going to them or providers that you maybe don't like or don't want to work with, you can hire your own and to meet all the same goals. So you can work with providers in your community. You can work with family, friends, neighbors, like anyone really that's qualified to provide that support to you, you can work with. And so that really expanded the availability of resources to a lot of the individuals that we work with.
Very nice. Now, so you mentioned a budget. I'm kind of curious, how do you come up with a budget in the first place?
Yeah. So what we do is we really look at what was being spent in the last 12 months. So while you've been with the regional center, and this is, of course, assuming you have been with the regional center for at least 12 months, there are circumstances where individuals come into the self-determination program brand new to the regional center, which is totally fine. But for individuals that do have prior expenditures through our traditional service delivery system, we start looking at the last year's worth of spending that they did on their services to give us like a baseline, right? Like how much have you spent so far? Was that enough for you? Was that working for you? What changes might we need to make? What services maybe do we need to change to meet those needs that weren't being met here? So that's where we get like our baseline from. But of course, there are circumstances where individuals were not accessing any services for a million different reasons, right? Lack of staffing, maybe the particular individual had behaviors that weren't tolerated at a lot of our placements or programs that are vendored with us. So we do have situations where an individual come to us with no prior expenditures. And in those situations, we really just focus on the individual's current needs, right? What's going on in your life right now, regardless of what you've tried to access in the past, what do you need going forward? What are the goals that you have identified? And based on those goals, we identify traditionally funded services that individual would qualify for. And the amount of money it would cost the regional center to pay for those services for people in our traditional model is how much we would add to your budget for that service. And then so you have the freedom on what we call a spending plan, which is a separate document that details out how you want to pay for your services or which providers you want to work with and how much money you want them to get. On that spending plan, the individuals have the freedom to allocate the funds from their budget to various different community-based providers or relatives or things like that.
Very nice. All right. Okay. So that's so helpful. So I'm thinking, okay, there's the traditional program and then there's the self-determination program. So it sounds like in the traditional program, the regional center is kind of the matchmaker, right? You go out, you find the vendors, you match them, done. So it sounds like self-determination program, there's a bit more work for the families. Does that sound right? That they need to find the providers? Are there other people who can help the families find the providers, or are the families kind of on their own with that?
Yeah, I mean, we always say when coming into self-determination, right, more freedom, more responsibility. So there's that less of that involvement with your regional center representative making those referrals, right? Because they're not necessarily working with an agency we are affiliated with. So when it comes to finding providers out in your community, it really is up to the participant and their family to identify providers they want to work with. Now, for those who may need a little extra support with navigating those community-based providers and identifying them, there is a service provider called an independent facilitator, which individuals can hire in two separate capacities. So they can hire an independent facilitator to support them prior to being an SDP. So use them as like a transitional support provider where they're identifying services in the community, staff, helping you set up your spending plan, all kinds of things like that, education related to SDP, all of that stuff. And then the independent facilitator can support ongoing as a hired provider that is paid through the spending plan, who can assist throughout the budget year, doing things like making sure invoices are processed on time, communicating with the regional center if there's issues, submitting requests for amendments or changes to the budget and spending plan, things like that. So they're a really solid, like almost like a liaison between the family, the participant, the regional center, and any other involved agencies that may be working with the participant.
Very nice. And they actually know what they're doing, which is helpful.
Yes, they are certified, they're qualified, they have to do training to do the job they do. So very thankful.
Great. Okay, now big question. How do they get paid?
Yeah, so when it comes to those transition supports, so before you come into the self-determination program, the regional center will fund up to 40 hours in total of support provided by one of these, either an independent facilitator or a person who has the same qualifications. And that's all funded by the regional center, not affiliated with your SDP budget or spending plan in any way. And that rate is set by the Department of Developmental Services. So depending on where you live in California and which regional center you're affiliated with, that rate may differ. So I'm in the Bay Area in San Jose. So our rate is different than maybe Golden Gate Regional Center up in San Francisco or San Diego Regional Center down in San Diego. So the rates do vary, but it's still up to those 40 hours for everyone. For the ongoing independent facilitation, we don't provide funding to the families or the participants to pay for ongoing independent facilitation. It is a totally optional service that you do not need to have to be successful in the program, but it's always encouraged. But the way that you would pay for that is essentially when you get your budget from the regional center, you can take a portion of those budget funds to allocate for the cost of the independent facilitator on your spending plan. So regional center can still pay for it, just not necessarily add additional funding for it. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Oh, I love it. Yeah, that's just part of the budget. All right. Okay, another question that I get asked a lot as an attorney, as a special needs planning attorney, is can our fees be included as part of the budget?
Yeah, so we have to think from the perspective of traditional services. And in our traditional services, we don't typically fund for things like attorney fees. Now, I say this in like a general sense, right? Like that's our standard, but we are a very flexible agency. We take into consideration everyone's unique circumstance. If there are specific circumstances that it's like life or death situation, we need this support and we do not have absolutely any other way to pay for it, then that's always a good time to speak with your service coordinator or your case manager at the regional center and have a conversation, because we can look into speaking with our executive team to see what other avenues are available for things like that.
Okay. So it sounds like it's worth trying out. It's worth applying for that, and you'll just see what happens. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Wow. And then the self-determination plan can really cover a lot of other things. You said it can cover family members and friends too. Do they need to be certified in their own special field or just have some experience with teaching this or that?
Yeah, so in the self-determination program, the services that you can access, it's a huge variety. So all the way from just simple in-home respite services to like dental services to like acupuncture services. So it is quite a wide variety of available services to individuals that go into the program. For things like friends or family who want to get hired on as a support staff, the financial management service company, which is a vendor provider that is a necessary component of this self-determination program, because they're the ones that are making sure your providers are getting paid and your providers are qualified. So they're another piece to the whole SDP puzzle that's super important. And their role is to make sure that when you hire support staff, whether it be a friend or family member, they're going to vet them to make sure that they have all the appropriate like background checks on file and any necessary qualifications that they may need to provide that service. And they determine which qualifications are going to be necessary based on the service code for SDP that they identify under. So you can actually look on the Department of Developmental Services website and get a full comprehensive list of all of the SDP services along with their definitions. And based on those service definitions, the FMS agency will say, you need to have a certification for being this type of provider, or you're providing acupuncture, you need to have the appropriate license or whatever to administer that type of therapy. So the FMS does all of that checking on the back end.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like we have the independent facilitator who could be really helpful, the financial management service. So they all kind of work together to help make sure that this is going smoothly.
Right. Yeah. It's a very tight-knit group that's working together to make the program possible.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. So if they're living in San Andreas Regional Center, that area of coverage, can they reach out to you or somebody else if they have questions about this? What should people do?
Oh, yeah. Any questions regarding the self-determination program, I am happy to answer. I can get emails directly to me. But if you're ever not able to get a hold of me, if you ever call just the front desk and ask to be forwarded to me, then that can happen as well. But yeah, I take conversations and emails from people in the community all the time and provide education and outreach often.
Well,
so
just like today. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This comes up so often in our community, and I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of break it down into plain English. What kind of services for developmentally disabled individuals, how we can get them those services. And I appreciate you coming on our channel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
If this video is helpful for you, share it to someone else who might benefit from it.